You're listening to Worshipology with Curtis Parks, a biblical, practical, and spiritual conversation about living and leading worship. Today's episode is brought to you by PraiseCharts. Worship leaders and pastors, are you looking for the best new worship songs to introduce to your church? From Phil Wickham to Elevation, Passion, and Maverick City, PraiseCharts has the latest ready to go. Whether you need chord charts, lead sheets, or full orchestrations, everything is formatted for your team and available for instant download. Stay current, save time, and lead with confidence. Check out PraiseCharts.com today and get your hands on the freshest songs for Sunday.
Well, hey, thanks so much for listening to the Worshipology podcast. This is a biblical, practical, spiritual conversation all about living and leading worship. And today, man, I think, Todd, we met back in 2014 or 2015. We were down in the Atlanta area with Pastor Mark Batterson playing some churches there. And I don't know if you remember, but you and I, we met at Tom and Chi restaurant.
Oh man, the tomato soup place.
Yeah, because I had just seen it on Shark Tank, and it was 5 minutes from our hotel. And dude, that was awesome. Todd Fields, say what's up to the Worshipology podcast.
What's up, you guys? It's good to be with you. Yeah, it's crazy how fast time goes by, Curtis. That was
oh my gosh,
that was not that long ago, and yet it was 11 years ago. So it was a while back.
Time flies, man. But I mean, Todd, you've obviously with Worship Circle is doing amazing things, and North Point Ministries working with Andy Stanley, and just such a voice in the worship community, man. Just for our listeners, how did you even get started in leading worship, and of course, I want to get to the Worship Circle, because that's such an amazing ministry where you've got voices like Paul Baloche, Matt Maher, Meredith Andrews, so many incredible voices. Charlie Hall, who we know on this podcast. How did you get from A to B, Todd?
I mean, it's a long story, Curtis, but the gist is I just always loved music. I mean, from the time I was little, there were musical influences that would pique my interest, from Peter, Paul and Mary, John Denver, the Beach Boys. I was a 70s kid, so
nice.
Lots of really good variety of music. The Carpenters coming out in the 70s. So being in a car seat driving around in Atlanta, hearing great melody, it moved me even as a little dude. So and then you're growing up, and I remember the radio even, and I had one of those first Walkmans that had a cassette player and a FM tuner. And my first cassette was Men at Work, and then I got Journey Escape. And I remember living near Stone Mountain, Georgia, and listening to those records. And I think the quality of what I would have heard through the headphones compared to now would have been really bad. But for me, I was just moved by music, and then from there it was hearing Eddie Van Halen play the guitar solo on "Beat It" with Michael Jackson. I had the Thriller album; that album blew me away.
Right,
Rock With You and that whole album from Off the Wall. I mean, I was always way into music, and the older I got and the more I became involved in it, the more I started to appreciate the people that produced it, the people that wrote it. Getting into the history of it. And so guitar happened when I was in about 9th grade. I just enjoyed playing. I started in folk guitar, learned how to finger pick acoustic, and then I wanted to play electric. Then it came back to acoustic with Stephen Curtis Chapman's More to This Life came out. Extreme had More Than Words on the radio, and I was like, wow, you can move people with just an acoustic guitar. That was different, College, Georgia State University. Somebody asked me to go on a mission trip to Europe with Operation Mobilization. We went to Germany and then Russia. The wall had just come down in 1992. Went to Russia, but in Germany, I heard this British man named Graham Kendrick leading worship in this arena.
Wow!
And I'm singing with Graham with all these people in different languages, and God began to do something in my heart there. I didn't even know what worship music was. I grew up in a kind of a non-denominational church that we sang I am a C, I am a CH. We didn't We didn't
Come
do
on, man.
We didn't do a whole lot of quote worship songs. It was just hymns and stuff back then.
Wow.
And then at some point after college, and that whole thing of God connecting my heart to worship through this mission trip, Louie Giglio moved to Atlanta, and we started this thing called 722. And I think Louie and Shelley kind of introduced me to more of where the worship movement was going. I didn't even really know it existed. We had Maranatha records and Integrity records that were great. It just, there wasn't any artist per se yet. And so,
Wow.
I remember the first time, hearing my friend Paul Balash and Open the Eyes of My Heart, Darlene Scheck, Shout to the Lord comes out, and people are like, what is this? Was working with the Billy Graham team for about 4 years doing crusades, and that was all kind of converging while 722 was taking off. And, man, I got into worship leading basically just because I was at the right place at the right time playing with the 722 band. I started out just wanting to play guitar because that's all I wanted to do. I didn't really want to sing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they started asking me to play more. North Point asked me to lead some on Sundays, and that started happening with Andy. And I will say, Andy had a band and youth group, so I learned how to rock back in the 80s.
I was going to say, I just read this Andy Stanley book, Enemies of the Heart.
Yeah.
And in it, he mentions you. Did he give you a guitar? Like, how did that go down?
No, he had this guitar. I think it was made by a company called Augustino.
Uh-huh.
And we used to have youth camp at Epworth by the Sea in St. Simons Island, Georgia. A lot of people have met the Lord there. And
wow.
I remember we were doing a talent show, and I didn't have an acoustic. I was playing electric at the time, and I asked him if I could borrow it, and he said sure. He was always kind to loan things. And as I'm rehearsing, I have the guitar on, and I turn and I hit the body of it on some brick wall or something. And I put this dent in it, and I was like, of course.
Oh, yep.
So that, that was a big deal, playing every week for students, going to Georgia State mission trip, Louie coming around, playing worship. And just, 722 lasted for a decade. And in that same time period, this guy named Chris Tomlin comes on the scene. I remember Carrie and I went to Passion in Fort Worth, Texas, saw Chris for the first time. He had written a song in Africa called Be Glorified. Next thing I know, Forever comes out, and then he's coming for the first time to 722. I remember Daniel, his guitar player, it was the first time he'd ever played with Chris at North Point.
Wow.
And so between that and then meeting Charlie and then Christy and Nathan, these worlds of Passion and North Point started converging, and I was just grateful to be around and really learn a lot, I think, about worship and the heart and who we're becoming and our identity in Christ through Louie and through Andy and the team. And that was kind of it, and then Louie started Passion City at some point. So he wasn't involved with North Point anymore, but I was still there working and helping the team, and left North Point 2017. And part of the reason, I felt like God was calling me to move on, and Worship Circle had started about 3 years prior, and it was just, I feel like there was something that God was calling me to that was definitely a lane for me that my story aligned with. And we got to the point where I could do that full time. So,
wow. I definitely want to get into what Worship Circle's all about, but a couple things in your story that I just kind of want to zoom in on. I love the fact that, you just said, I just happen to be at the right place at the right time. And for our listeners, maybe a lot of people don't realize, so many pivotal moments in our modern worship era, I think, center in the city of Atlanta. Is there something about, obviously Atlanta where you got, the Passion Conference so many years, and you've got North Point, you've got Louie Giglio Ministries, a good friend of mine, Matt Podesla, he just told me so many stories from that era, and what is it about Atlanta, number one, and then number two, the idea of just being available. You can be in the right place at the right time, but if you're guarded and you're locked off to what the Lord is doing, you can't see and have enough foresight to know, like, man, God may be calling me to be a part of this thing. So, man, number one, maybe it's the 2 A's. Talk about just Atlanta in general. What's the spirit there? And then having that availability factor where you were able to step into those moments, Todd.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, if I could have orchestrated any of my story or the timing of anything, I couldn't. I think for me, it was just that, and it still is. It's like, Lord, what do you have for me this day? That's all I.
Wow.
That's all I can. Like, if I trust that you're God, I'm going to surrender to your plan, and that's not Todd's plan. And man, the times in my life that I've tried to orchestrate Todd's plan, never ever one time have worked out. And the times that so part of my motto, Curtis, now, and people always tell, well, but man, how did Worship Circle happen? And I was like, man, I don't know, and I still don't know what I'm doing.
Wow.
And so for me, it's almost like I can't, it's all God. And I'm not just saying that, but like, I have got to surrender every day to, like, Lord, if there's somebody you're trying to connect me to with this limited time I have on the earth, would you bring them to mind? Would you connect us through somebody else, and like, give me vision for what you want to do in me first?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing other than me knowing myself well and knowing you in a deeper way that matters, and all of it stems from that. So it's literally just, man, a journey of daily surrender, of going, I'm going to do all I know to do, and I'm also going to not become an expert or thinking I'm an expert. I always want to keep learning. And so
good.
Even now, we'll talk about the ministry later, but it's literally like, there's things that God's done, Curtis, that on my best day and my smartest days, there's absolutely no way I could have orchestrated a thing.
Wow.
And part of that is where our message of loved and not alone comes from. It's like, yes, you're loved by God. Yes, you're not alone. You're always in his presence, but also we find wholeness and healing when we're authentic and real with community. That's the way God designed us as a people. As far as Atlanta goes, I mean, I've been here my whole life, man. I've traveled all over the world. I love this city. The traffic's as bad as LA now. And I don't love that, but man,
I can attest to that, having gone to several Braves games. It is no joke in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's crazy. And but I will say, it's not just Atlanta. I think Georgia's got a rich musical heritage,
Yeah.
From Little Richard to James Brown to the Allman Brothers to Gladys Knight. Like, there's all this just rich history of soul and music. And of course, we're right next door to Alabama and Muscle Shoals, and not far away from Nashville. So I've just always been a Southern man. I grew up listening and loving Southern music. I mean, I loved R&B, gospel, Andre Crouch. I mean, all kind of different variety. But Atlanta's just got a rich musical heritage.
Wow.
I've got a rich heritage here, just with my family, on both sides of my parents. But as far as worship goes in Atlanta, I don't know why it all happened this way. I know Louie and Shelley have been a big part of kind of what the modern worship movement looks like. And I know they came here mainly because Louie's dad needed him with him because he was in poor health. So, I mean, they were firing on all cylinders in Texas and Waco at Choice. And then they feel like God's calling them here. So again, it's just a following, like, Lord, what are you doing? So Louie and Shelley were doing the same thing. Like, Lord, what are you doing? And where do we need to be right now? And my prayer, Curtis, has always been, Lord, I'm not smart enough to figure out how to use my life the way that you want it to be used with the few moments I have left. And so help me live these days one at a time, eyes open, heart surrendered. And the other thing, this is a side thing, but the more I'll go on this journey of being known by God and others, there's this, my friend Michael Cusick said this thing one time. He said, the goal of the Christian life is to be loved by God.
Wow.
And I was like, that's totally opposite from every. I thought the goal of the Christian life was for me to be a good foot soldier and go tell a bunch of people the right thing to pray. And man, this is how you need to be living. And so the more, at 55, be 56 this summer, it's just really, I'm learning that, man, I can't give away a love I haven't received, and I can't receive that love if I'm moving too fast to receive it.
Wow. Say that again, man. That is so good.
No, I can't give away a love I haven't first received, and I can't receive that love if I'm running too fast to not receive it. So,
man, that's good.
It's literally, Lord, with this day, this one day, and maybe I'll see the end of it. Who do I need to be attuned to for your kingdom with the work you've entrusted in my hands? I want to do that. I'm not going to be afraid because fear isn't from you. Fear dissipates in the presence of God.
Wow.
So I want to realize that your presence never leaves me, and in the mundane, and in the mundane, and in the gatherings, and the work, and the rest, would you just continually speak your love over me? And as a result of my ability to surrender to that, Curtis, I feel like that's where we're then able to be conduits to pour out to other people. Wow. That same love that God's given us, but we can't receive it man, I'm speaking to the choir because a lot of my life, especially as we had young kids and I was in ministry and full time at church and just always every Sunday always doing rehearsals. Yeah. And that's a season so many of us are in. And so it's just you got to pay attention to your heart. And I remember I don't know that I paid attention to my heart, man, until I was probably 43.
Wow.
And I was standing on stage one day and it hit me. It was like the Lord was like, Todd, why do you care so much about what these people think?
Wow.
From Andy on down, like what, why do you care? And I'm like, you know what, Lord, I need to not care. I just need to make sure that I'm doing what you want me to do, and I want to please you.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a game changer, and it started me on a path of wanting to know myself, and that's been a long process.
Man, there's so many nuggets in here. I'm taking some notes here, but I love that. Pay attention to your heart, because I do think that so many of us can get in this rinse and repeat cycle of just like, almost on autopilot. You're just doing what you've always done. You're getting the same results that you've always gotten, but you don't realize that, like, man, the whole goal of our Christian life. Yeah. I mean, to be loved by God, I think it's in the Westminster Shorter Catechism where it's like, to glorify God and enjoy his presence. It's like when you think about those two things, it's like, man, like, are we getting this thing wrong if we're stressed out all the time, if we're always go, go, go? Like one of my mentors once told me, Todd, he said, when you look at the life of Jesus, he was never in a hurry. And I'm just like, man, like when Jesus talks about my burden is light and my yoke is easy. I mean, talk about that, because it does seem like, I mean, obviously, like, you've got a lot going on, and not just in worship and music, but with family and growing family and kids, and you're in Atlanta, which is not a slow paced city. How do you keep that rhythm of rest and keep that rhythm of like where, you're able to pay attention to your heart? And what are some of those, not triggers per se, but what are some of those like red flags that pop up where you're like, okay, Todd, maybe I need to pay attention to this in my heart?
Good question, Curtis. I think, Jesus said my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So that's either true or it's not true.
Wow.
And more often than not, I have to assess my rhythms and say, am I in a heavy yoke season right now? Is this role a heavy yoke? And Lord, what would it look like for this to become an easier yoke, or to let go of the things that are costing me? There's two. One, just to back up, and we'll go back to the rest piece. Lately, kind of where we are as a ministry, is the word for the year is integrity. And I used to think integrity was, integrity is somebody who does the right thing.
Yep.
And I don't think that's at all the reality of what integrity means. I think it's, I had a friend who has done some therapy work with me just on my story, and he said, man, you haven't been a man of integrity because you're disconnected from your heart.
Whoa. Wow.
And so integrity is about integrating our heart and our soul and our mind together so that they're all connected. And I see even in the worship landscape and ministry landscape, Curtis, there's so many of us, myself included, who thought what God most wanted in our leadership was a regurgitation of truth.
Wow.
Apart from it being connected to our heart and being real for us. And so now, in my life, I'm on a journey to know my heart, where it was wounded, what I need to grieve. Sometimes a lot of it's about going back and go, Jesus, would you allow me to weep with you over the things that harmed me?
Wow.
Would you be with me in the remembering of that so that I can heal, so that I can break covenants I've made, the agreements I've made of things that I thought the enemy told me I was, and would you free me for that in such a way that when I sing a song, it's absolutely emotional for me. I'm not disconnected from my heart, and it's emotional not just because I'm thinking about Jesus and the cross, and that's emotional enough.
Right. Yeah.
But it's emotional for me because he's shown me in the solitude and the silence and the grief and in the pain that he's there and he'll never leave me. Amazing. And so then that song is, we're on a stage or wherever God's got us, it's integrated with our heart. And I tell people all the time, like, I can tell a worship leader who is integrated with their heart, because
wow,
the tears will flow for me in the audience because they're being real. And so a lot of what I've been doing lately with leaders, man, is just going, guys, do you not know how precious you are? Do you not know how much your story matters? And that remembering it well and processing it well will allow you to be more present to God in the here and now, and more present to the people God's entrusted you to be with. And
wow.
So that's a thing. And then rest is, part of when this whole Worship Circle thing started, I just would tweet like years ago on Twitter, and I go,
yeah,
hey, I'm going to do some Skype worship coaching. Anybody want in? And I would start a spreadsheet, and then I would talk to guys, call them, and that's how it started. But
yeah,
a lot of it is really looking at our calendar and going, okay, Lord, with the help of the Holy Spirit, with wise counsel, with those closest to me, what is it? Is this sustainable?
Yeah, right.
And so, I mean, I'm in a season, man, where I just, I'm worship leading at a church called Peachtree Church in Buckhead, and they've entrusted the worship service for the contemporary to me, and man, I'm loving it because it's a light yoke for me. We've yet to use a click tracker computer. All right. We just have musicians come in that I trust and worship leaders that I know their hearts are good, and we just get together, and there's no smoke, no lights, no So wow. That is a light yoke for me, because there's
that's precious in this day and age, man.
Yes, for so many years there was the whole, and it's not that you throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like there's good that comes from all of it, but in this season, it's just been healing for me to not have to carry anything beyond the melody, the message, and the community. And then Worship Circle, I work from home, man, so I don't have to get stressed up in Atlanta traffic. Most
That's
days,
a huge blessing.
If the weather's, sometimes, Curtis, a light yoke in that thing that tips it into that territory is, man, get out and take your calls on a walk outside the church if the weather's nice, and don't stay inside all the time. Like your body,
so good.
Your body needs to breathe good air. And your body needs to move, and actually walking is healing your brain because there's this bilateral stimulation, left and right hemispheres going on. And you talk on, it's just like, man, if the weather's nice, I'm out. And if I got to take calls, I'm outside. And that's a thing that will de-stress you that anybody can do, you know?
Yep. Hey, listen, I've got a personal goal this year, 10,000 steps a day. I've hit it so far.
Yeah.
But you're so right, man. Like, there's something so valuable and precious about getting outside, doing a prayer walk, doing a walk with your calls. Like, I love that, man. That's the best practical advice we've had right there.
Well, and it's really akin to becoming like Jesus, because he walked everywhere. And
bingo, man.
We can't discount what he modeled. He was God in a human body, and he said, hey, I can't be with you right now.
Wow.
And he said, I'm going to choose not to heal you, but I'm going to choose to heal you. He was just, man, he was dialed in to the Father, and he understood the limits of the earthly body.
Wow.
So that he could sympathize with our weaknesses and understand. And I'm there with you. Like, I've gotten back into walking. I'm even getting into this rucking thing where you put weight on you with a backpack.
Okay. All right. Going hardcore in 2025, man.
I'm trying, man. They say you burn like 2 to 3 times the calories if you got weight on your back. But,
wow,
man, it's paying attention to the things where God is present in a good meal and healthy stuff to sustain us, and present in exercise and walking, and present in staying connected with the right people in your life that are safe for you.
Talk to me about that. So, because the connected to people thing, you know, and I know Worship Circle, it's not just you. You've got so many great people around you. Talk about that a little bit, like the process of collaboration and connection with others. It's like, you know, Mark Batterson has this thing that he would say often, bumping into other people's anointings. You know, it's like you realize that we're better together. How does that play out with the Worship Circle? And like, what are you guys doing, you know, this year where it's like, man, we need to hear about this. We need to know about this, Todd.
Well, I think John Ortberg, let me grab my notes real quick. John Ortberg spoke to us the other day, and
oh my gosh,
John said this, and I think it could have been a Dallas Willard thing, but he said we can only be loved to the extent that we're known. And so to be fully known is to be fully loved. And so our whole purpose is that people would know they're loved and not alone. John Lynch says we can't be loved unless we have needs, and unless we admit we're needy. And I think in the church and in society, there's this thing in all of us that's like, man, strength is not being needy. So my goal is to not need any help. And guys are like that from the time we're born. Like, I'm not going to read the directions. I'm going to figure it out by myself. There's like, or man, I came up with this all on my own. And that's just, I think that goes against what we were created for, where Jesus says that they would be one as you, the Father and the Spirit and I are one. And so, there's this thing, man, about what does it look like to let a few people into the fullness of my journey, of my shortcomings, of my successes. And that's not where I gravitated toward in ministry. Because my capital was, hey, he's on stage, he sings good and writes good songs, and if I were to ever let people know how broken I truly am, I would not measure up to what I think they want me to be. That's where you get into, hey, we're all professional Christian territory. My job is to be a professional Christian. And so at 43, the first time I walked into my mentor, Reggie Campbell, who's now with Jesus, he had a thing called Radical Mentoring. I walked into a men's retreat. That's where this whole Worship Circle thing came from. I met a friend of mine, Larry Green, and Reggie. And there was round tables and guys in community, and no one was wearing a mask. And I was like, no matter what happens to me in my life, I'm going to be okay. I've found home.
Wow.
I feel like I'm home.
Yeah.
And home is not a place. Home is what we were designed for, which is to be fully known and not to hide. And the enemy's like, man, you got to hide because if people knew. But home and freedom is, I'm going to be fully known. I don't want to hide. I don't want to have secrets. And then as we gather some trusted people in community around that God leads us to, and we open ourselves up to being known, more often than not, 99.99% of the time, the answer we hear from every person in that community is me too.
Wow.
And then
So true.
Then you go, okay, I'm not an alien. There's,
Yep.
this is all common to man. We're all broken. Our only hope is Jesus. And connection is so helpful in healing. And so, man, for me, just on the journey I've been on, it's, okay, I need to call my friend Kevin in Colorado. And I just need to say, hey, man, I'm having a rough night. I'm feeling really alone. Just wanted to talk. Sure, man, I'm here,
Wow.
That's not normal for me, man, because I've been private my whole life. And for many years, it was like, no, I'm okay. I'm good. I can do this.
Yeah.
And so the older I get, I've just found such beauty in relationships and friendships. And it's not...
Yeah.
And God's separating me in seasons from, I think there's seasonal friendships and seasonal community where you're like, we're all doing something valiant together. This is great. And that's why we're friends. And it's beautiful and it's great, but God moves us into different seasons. And for me right now, I'm in a season where I've got new friends.
Yeah.
And they're friends of the heart. All the people that I involve in my life right now, for the most part, have been with me through the ups and downs of the seasons. And they're like, hey, we're here. We've got you.
Wow. Wow.
And so that's what I remember. Worship Circle, man, we moved to San Francisco one year to help a church called Epic Church. Great people. Ben Pilgrim's the pastor. And, moved some of our boys out there, and it was an adventure. And I'll never forget getting there, and I didn't really know a soul, but my Worship Circle small group I had. So I remember getting online and just weeping because like Carrie was back home trying to get our house taken care of. I was there trying to hold the fort down with work, and my Worship Circle guys were just present with me as I wept. And they didn't have to tell me anything they didn't really say anything. They just said, Todd, we love you and we're here.
Wow.
And that is really what Worship Circle is, man. It's a ministry can be lonely, and especially if you're in a place where, man, where I to be fully known and really risk, I could take a hit. And so I want to be connected to a place where I know myself better, where I become more able to surrender to this idea of being loved and not alone. And I've got a family that's different denominations, different places in the world, and we're all connected. It's kingdom,
Wow. Wow.
So that's how that whole thing kind of what it came out of. It was me going, man, I feel so lonely, and I'm in one of the biggest churches in America, and I'm so alone.
That's wild.
I've got friends. I've written stuff. I lead. There's people that are like, Todd, you're amazing. And yet I'm really lonely.
Wow.
And,
that's the truth, isn't it? I mean, I think so many people can resonate with that because it is so much like, it's almost like a facade or a role that you step into where it's like, I'm kind of like the guy that's leading the music for these thousands of people. But if you don't find that connection, I love what you were talking about earlier, that integrity is being connected through the heart. Like if that's a season, and I would just say this for anybody that's listening, if that's a season where you find yourself like, man, I'm busy, but I'm lonely. I'm surrounded by people, but I don't know if I'm known, man, worshipcircle.com. We're going to put a link in our show notes for sure. You need to check into that because I feel like we're just kind of like, this almost to me feels like, it's like I feel like and we are in the room together, like, you're on FaceTime here and we're seeing each other, but it's like the value of being in communion with God and with others. Like there's that key piece where as worship leaders, don't miss out and with others.
Yeah.
Like that's so huge, man. Like what does that look like on the scale of like, is it gathering together certain times throughout the year? Is it monthly calls? What does that look like on that connection basis with Worship Circle?
Yeah, we do a 10-month term. And we used to do 6 months terms, so we extended it because it was like just as we're getting to know each other, we have to say goodbye.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
And the other thing is we have this retreat every fall called the Rest Retreat, and you can sign up for it. It's at Stone Mountain again, October 20 to 22, but it's a gathering of worship leaders, and this year we'll have some pastors as well. But man, wow. I remember the first year we did Rest Retreat, Christy Knuckles had a girls group. She kind of helped me start this idea, and we all showed up there with 100 leaders in a small chapel with a Bose PA and an acoustic guitar. Wow. And Nathan had a keyboard, and it was like it felt like a relief for everybody because they were so used to being so produced that we had this time just, man, let's just be. And so we like to say Worship Circle's a place where doers can be. And
that's good.
And so it starts out, we start in January, we do 10 months, but we meet for a main session a couple hours a month. And then we also have another 1 hour session that's usually more practical in nature. But a lot of the stuff we do in small group has to do with the heart, has to do with your soul, care, being seen, being known. We've got just different beautiful friends that are helping us, John Lynch, Sean Eldridge, or it's all the Johns, John Ortberg.
Man,
Kathy,
that's the trifecta John right there.
Yeah, then God, through Providence, God's connected me with a friend, Adam Young, who's a therapist out in Colorado, who was trained by Dan Allender up in Seattle, and then Kathy Lorizell, who helped Dan start the Seattle school. Our paths are all converging. So we're starting to integrate story work, which is what Dan Allender came up with Kathy, into pastors' care and worship leader care, because we did our first story work intensive in Franklin in January, Curtis, and it blew my mind. All these friends that I've known, Charlie was there, like all these friends I've walked so many miles with, we got even closer through being vulnerable about our family of origin stories. So, so the term's 10 months online, but then it ends in person. And that's where we always kid because we get together and I didn't realize you were so short. I didn't realize you were so tall because it was all Zoom. We have meals together. We just go on a beautiful journey for 48 hours of just being in God's presence and hanging with each other. This past year was our second year with Worship Circle pastors. And so pastors are tough to get in. They're tough to get to slow down. And so but we have a beautiful group of 14 pastors this year, 3 small groups led by spiritual directors. And we just had an in-person retreat in Colorado a couple of weeks ago that was beautiful. So we're pulling pastors into this community as well, and we're going to keep growing that.
That's amazing.
Man, it's just that thing, I used to, and take this the right way, for so many years, it was like the gospel is Christ died for my sins, rose from the dead, I'm going to heaven. And I'm like, that's 100% it. And the last thing Jesus said before he left the earth is, I'm with you always to the end of the age.
Yeah.
So we have a ministry of presence. And so the ministry of the Lord is really, I'm with you always.
That's
and
so
one of the ways he manifests his presence to us, it is in the walking daily and the being still and the breathing and the centering prayer and all these things we build into our regimen. But it's also being in community.
So good.
Because when we're connected as the body, we experience Jesus and his love. And so that's where the loved and not alone thing came from. That it wasn't even a brilliant idea. It came literally through some silent prayer. And that's just kind of the purpose God gave us years ago. And every time we say it, people are like, man, that's so amazing. And I'm like, but it's so simple,
Yeah. Man, I think we overcomplicate the simple, and we're really good at missing the beauty in in just these simple rhythms that
Right.
Jesus established and he left us, man. Todd, dude, just in our few remaining minutes, man, I'd love to ask you a question I ask everybody on this podcast. What's the Lord speaking to you right now? What has kind of been on repeat in your prayer time? What is he just kind of revealing to you in these days, man?
I mean, I think it's just this journey of continued surrender, Curtis. Like
So good.
less of me, more of you. Not as some pie in the sky voodoo kind of thing, some hocus pocus, but a reality of going, Lord, would you take away from me everything that you want to take away for my good? And would you put in everything in my path that is your will before I leave this earth? What does that look like? Because like I said, I don't want any of this to be Todd's ideas. I want it to be God's. And that's just where I'm at right now. So that's that daily prayer and just waking up and having that time to be still and pay attention.
Man, I love that. I'm actually in the final chapters of a book by Bono called Surrender.
Oh yeah, man.
And,
I listened to that audiobook and it was brilliant.
Oh my goodness, man. Well, when you're talking about, being in a community of like-minded individuals that know your journey. I mean, talk about you two being on this path together for 40 plus years now. And, but I love that book, and I'm actually preaching on the topic of surrender next Sunday.
Yeah.
And so that has just kind of been on repeat in my heart and mind. And the fact that you just mentioned, I know the Holy Spirit is doing something with his people where it's like, man, just surrender is so huge. It goes against everything that we're taught in life, everything we're taught, in success, in the American dream, and even like parts of the church that we've got wrong, where it's like daily surrender is everything. Wow.
So Ortberg said this in our session this week: the will is made to surrender to God.
Okay. I'm stealing that.
The will, I think it
Wow.
was a Dallas Willard quote, but the will is made to surrender to God. And so it's God's
Wow.
will that we surrender. And it's that whole, not my will, but yours be done. God, please protect me from doing stupid, time-wasting things with the few breaths you've given me on the planet. Hey, I forgot to mention when we were talking about Worship Circle, we're going to do our first citywide event in Dallas, May 1st through 3rd.
Oh, awesome.
Dallas. So if you're listening and you're in the Dallas metro area, Oklahoma City or Tulsa, anywhere in that region, we're going to be at the King's University for a few days, and it's going to be kind of like Rest Retreat Light.
Okay.
But Paul will be there, Paul Baloche, Meredith, Mark Harris, Andy Chrisman, both those guys from For Him. Andy Gullahorn will be doing a concert.
Nice.
On night one. So, and I'll be there. Kathy Lorzell will be there. It's going to be a sweet time for people in that area to come. You don't even have to get a hotel room if you stay there, but just come experience the ministry that God's doing through this.
I love it, man. Love what you guys are doing. Worshipcircle.com. We're going to put links in the show notes and how you can connect with Todd. Todd, just love your spirit, man. Thanks for spending some time with us. And God bless you, man.
Thanks, buddy. It's been an honor.
You've been listening to Worshipology with Curtis Parks. To connect or learn more, visit curtisparks.com. This episode was brought to you by your friends at PraiseCharts.com. Whether you need simple chord charts, lead sheets, vocal arrangements, full orchestrations, or stems, we've got it all ready to download instantly. Plus, their affordable bundles and flexible formats save you time and money, so you can focus on leading worship and not scrambling for resources. If you haven't checked them out yet, now is the time. Visit PraiseCharts.com and get everything you need for your worship team today.